This is a chat I've been waiting for some time now. My guest today is California raised, but it didn't take him long to sign a major record deal and start touring the world. Hey everyone, it's Randy Halsey with Backstage Pass Radio. We will chat with composer, producer, singer, songwriter, rock star, and my pal, Tony Carey, when we return.
This is Backstage Pass Radio, the podcast that's designed for the music junkie with a thirst for musical knowledge. Hi, this is Adam Gordon, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn alerts on for this and all upcoming podcasts. And now, here's your host of Backstage Pass Radio, Randy Halsey.
One hand clapping.
Tony, here we are. Welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Hey, man. Pretty good.
Well, thanks for gracing me with your presence and your time. I'm glad you're here. And I have to tell the listeners that the interview today will definitely be the Tony Carey career cliff notes, as there's probably no way that we could cover your entire career in the show, but we'll give it a whirl. So how are things?
For dummies.
How are things, man? Good to see you.
Good, man. I'm in Germany, as you know, and it's the weather's turning. It's winter, and there's Christmas music everywhere because yesterday was the first Advent Sunday, and we're winding in toward Christmas. So I'm visiting my kids. I got three adult children here, and one's in Berlin, that's up north. One's in Munich, down by the mountains, that's down south. I'm kind of exactly in the middle, so I'm on a lot of trains visiting them, and I have a granddaughter, and looking forward to the holidays.
That's awesome. Well, that's something that we don't, as you well remember, we don't do much by way of trains. I guess if you're in a big city like New York or something like that, you move around on, city-run transportation, but the trains are big there where you are, right?
Well, the country is small. I mean, I think Germany is the size of Oregon and a half at most. And I've heard for years, why doesn't America, the United States, have a high rail system like Japan or whatever, or Europe? And the thing is, because it's too big. I mean, they got all these huge states. I mean, if you want to go through Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa and Idaho to get up to Spokane on a train, you'll be over 3 days on a train.
Yes.
Here, there's nothing longer than about 6 hours, and the damn thing goes 150 miles an hour.
Wow. Okay.
And they're comfortable like a living room. I mean, it's just the way it is here.
Sure.
And in France has amazing trains. They have got little table lamps with lampshades on them, and it's like,
real intimate setting, right?
Like Hercule Poirot in the Agatha Christie novels, like the Orient Express. I've been on the Orient Express,
really?
By the way.
Wow.
Yeah, that goes to still running. It's all made out of walnut. It's beautiful. And trains are big here. And the Autobahn just means highway. The highways are so jammed, especially at holiday season and rush hour and all that I sometimes will drive somewhere, but if I'm going alone, which I did this last run, I just get in a train.
Well, it seems contrary to popular belief, because when, here in the States, when we hear Autobahn, we think this is a road you jump out on and drive 7,000 miles an hour. And then you're telling me like the polar opposite. You sit in traffic and you can't move, so it's kind of contradictory a little bit. Okay.
It used to be like no speed. There's still stretches with no speed limit.
Okay.
But it used to be like you said, 7,000 miles an hour and no brakes, and hang out for dear life. In fact, I drove. Fastest I ever drove was 250 kilometers. That's 140 miles an hour, and that's fast.
Yes.
Pro. I'm not a pro or anything. In fact, I was a kid and out of my mind. But I mean, it takes 2 hours to get into Berlin. It's such a huge city, and they have this ring around the city, and it takes 2 hours to negotiate that at the best of times. It's just urban sprawl,
Yeah.
Like everything else. But I've been here for 45 years, and 40 years ago, you could drive in Bavaria by the Alps. You could drive a long way. And I had a buddy that would he was an engineer, and he would drive to the studio on his Rice rocket, and he would go 270, which is like 150 miles an hour plus a bit.
Jeez.
And I mean, just zoom. And he had the leathers and he had the helmet, but still, if he came off that thing, you know, he'd slide into the studio from 10 miles out.
Right. Well,
anyway,
I guess
everybody is falling prey to urban sprawl, just like everywhere else.
It's everywhere. It is everywhere. Well, if we turn the dial back just a little bit, you were born in Watsonville, correct? Watsonville, California.
Artichoke capital of the world.
That's right, California. But I believe it was Was it Turlock that you were raised in Turlock, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess I was 3. I don't remember it, of course. My dad built a house in Turlock, California. Here's an interesting fact. I Zillowed it. And my old man bought it or had it built for $11,000 in 1956. It's $500,000 right now, and it's still a piece of shit. So,
wow,
yeah,
it's crazy. I looked up something on the same thing the other day, and just this little like 1,600 square foot home that was like 40 years old was $1.7 million, and I'm like, and I'm in Houston, Texas. Yeah. And I'm in a modest house here. It's not big, 2,800 square feet. And I think I bought my house for like $250,000. We've got a pool and, it's like you get so much more here than you do, like somewhere like California. You can't even afford to live out there.
You know that show Fixer Upper?
Yeah.
So they're in Waco. And we get that here, so we watch it. Okay. I love it. I let Chip and Joe Gaines. And I like, she turns them into like, she's a professional interior designer. But the whole run up to this show is we find rundown houses in the best neighborhoods and fix them up. So I said, wait a minute. And these houses are all like 3,000 square feet and 212,000. I said, wait a minute. Let's go back to the credits and see when that was filmed. They're 6 and 7 years old.
Yeah.
And so I Zillowed Waco, Texas real estate, and it's tripled since then.
Oh, yeah.
Since Fixer Upper.
Yeah.
So what
crazy.
Do you do? And now there's an analogy in there. What do you do if you're a young family, you want to buy a house, interest rates are now 7%, they're going to go up, and I think, are they 7? No, what are interest rates in the States?
I think they're about that. My son's in real estate, and he was just mentioning that yesterday, that they're probably around 6.5%, 7% somewhere around there right now.
And it's going to go up.
Yeah.
And so what's a young family do now if they want to buy a house in America? How do they make that nut? Well, they don't.
Yeah.
And the analogy to that is the music business here. I came up at a time, the 70s, 80s, and 90s when you'd actually sell physical albums. And if you did well, you could do well. And these days, you got to have 1 billion streams to put a down payment on a free lunch. I mean, it's just crazy.
It is.
So young bands that are just as talented as any other young bands ever were, including Nirvana or Black Sabbath or whatever, when they started out, how do they start out? How do they even get going? Where do they play? How do they get known? It's calamitous.
Yes.
It's the same as the real estate market. And young musicians still ask me, how do I get going? How do I get a start? I said, well, it's all like it's always been. It's the right place, the right time, the right amount of talent, but keep your day job and go back to school and get a law degree.
Absolutely. Right? I look back at it a little bit. So I'm a local artist here in Cypress, Texas, which is a little northwest of the Houston area. And I just look at how the music business is. And at what time I was playing, I think upwards to maybe 120, 130 shows a year as a part-time entertainer, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of shows for somebody that works a full-time, job. And I always said, as much as as a kid, I wanted to be a rock star like every young boy does. I'm glad that I kept a day job, that I had something steady to fall back on, because it just seems like the music industry is so watered down. And like you said a minute ago, you used to sell records. I think that's where the money came from back in the early days. And now there's no money in the.
Finish your thought, and I will expand on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong because you're the professional, right? But it seemed like that's where the bands were making their money. Of course, they made it on tours, but they were selling records, and that's where a large portion of the money came from. But now, fast forward to 2022, it seems like a lot of these local artists are relying on merchandise sales.
With T-shirt companies.
Yeah.
Fans of T-shirt companies.
Yeah, and there's no money. There's no money in the selling of the records and the albums anymore.
I'll go one farther.
Okay.
In the 70s, in the 60s, 50s, and 40s, everybody got fucked. I mean, in the 40s, they would or 50s, they'd take some bluesman, immortal bluesman, and buy his whole catalog for a bottle of Jim Beam, you know?
Sure.
And he never got a penny. And until Led Zeppelin came and changed the game in 1969 with Peter Grant, or 68, and all of a sudden he said, no, this is 90-10. The artist gets 90% of the gate. You take the 10 or you don't get Led Zeppelin. And they were the most popular band in the world. And he changed the rules. That's one thing. But when Fleetwood Mac was selling 26 million copies of Rumors in the late 70s, it wasn't the whole band that was making the money. It was the songwriter. And the writers make the money on record sales, not the band, unless they have an internal deal. Now, Deep Purple, for instance, the first few albums had a deal where they split everything 5 ways, the writing. Then actually Ritchie and Ian at the time got a little smarter, and they said, wait a minute, I'm writing the music and Ian's writing the lyrics. Fuck you guys, basically. And then things got a little more lopsided the other way. So if you wrote, there isn't, and Congress has tried to put this through for years, there isn't a performance royalty. So if your song's on the radio and you're in a band, they pay a lot of money to the writer and none to the drummer, bass player, or whatever in general. That is slowly changing, but it's disproportionate in every sense of the word. Now, of course, you need a good song. It's only good, that's in quotation marks. We'll get into that too, but you need a good song to get on the radio, and the writer is, of course, due the credit for providing that good song. But without the infrastructure of the band and without being able to record it, I mean, Tom Petty was, of course, the writer, but without the Heartbreakers, Breakdown wouldn't have been a number one single.
Sure.
This is talk about 70s to late 70s.
Yeah.
So it's the songwriters that make the money. So you'll see guys from really, really famous bands, and they're driving a 15-year-old beater, and they're late on the rent, and they can't make their alimony, and they're flat ass broke.
Yeah.
And life's not fair, and then you die. I mean, we know that.
Sure.
But the music business is specifically not fair.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, Tony, because what I've loved about this show since I started it in February of last year, it's a learning platform for me. I learned things that I didn't know, right? And I had the pleasure of talking to Fee Waybill from the Tubes on my show. And Fee, we had a conversation about bands that had remade their song. I think it was White Punks on Dope. Yeah. And I said, well, did they have to call and ask, your permission to record that song? And he's like, no, like they can record it, and
anybody can record anything.
Exactly, and I had no idea of that. Like the songwriter is the one that's making all the money on the song anyway.
There's a popular misconception that if you do a cover, if you do want to cover a Beatles song, you got to get a hold of Paul or Ringo, and get permission. No, you don't. Anybody can record and release anything, with the caveat that you won't make any money. Paul and Ringo make all the money. I mean,
the songwriter,
writer makes the money. So if the Tubes without Fee re-record White Punks on Dope, assuming Fee wrote it, which I think he did, he's happy to have them re-record it. And I hope it's a hit, because he's going to make all the money.
Sure.
Now, it might, the Tubes might get a bump. They will get a bump if it's a rediscovered lost classic. They'll get jobs from that. They get shows, and they'll be able to sell T-shirts and hopefully attract a paying audience.
Right.
But the real money, if it's any kind of a radio or streaming sensation, will go to the writer, and in this case, that's Fee. So the correct answer to can I cover your song? First of all, you don't have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, yes, please.
The more the merrier, right?
Always. There is no. Yes is the answer.
Nothing exceeds like excess, right? Is what they say.
Yeah.
Well, you had moved out to New Hampshire at the ripe old age of, I think it was 17.
15, and it was Connecticut.
Was it Connecticut? Okay.
Yeah,
and
first,
you land, I think it was a major deal that you landed with ABC Dunhill Records.
Yeah.
Now, did you just up and leave home to make this move, or was this kind of planned out for you? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Everything's accidental in my life. And here's the thing. My dad was an entomologist, and he went to school in Tucson, Arizona. He went to college. He got a bachelor's degree in entomology. So that's bugs, the study of insects. So he got a job with a chemical company whose job is to kill bugs. We were in Turlock, California, which is now a metropolis. I mean, it's 70 or 80,000 people, but that at the time in the 50s was 6,000 people. It was a little burg, a lot of more cows than people. And I spoke Spanish when I was really small. I don't anymore. And they promoted him to a Manhattan gray flannel suit commuter job. The corporate headquarters of the company was in Westport, Connecticut, which is one of the 3 or 4 richest towns in America. And he hated this, and he did this for us, for the kids. I have 2 brothers and me. And in Westport, he would take the train into Manhattan and work as a product manager for this company. And he did this whole commuter thing. And I got the opportunity to go to probably the best music high school in the United States, which is Staples High School in Westport, Connecticut. I had 30 music classes and 1 chemistry class and a note for PE that I didn't have to show up. And that's all I did in my sophomore, junior, and senior years. Is music and orchestra. Wow. I learned orchestra. I learned string bass, the bowed contrabass. Played symphonies. I was all Connecticut orchestra. And the thing is, was I going to go to music school, or was I going to go out and rock and roll? And I don't know if you have any kind of censorship on this program, but I'll tell the story like it happened.
Sure.
And then you can decide if you're going to cut it out.
No, go ahead.
I had a bass teacher who had a combo. My instructor, orchestral bass instructor, had a combo played at the country club. And Paul Newman was always there. He lived in town, and all these movie stars, because it was a really, really ritzy town. And he had a trio. They play on Sundays at the country club. And I got accepted to Juilliard, which is the music school for string bass, contrabass, and to the Eastman School, which is upstate New York in Rochester. And I wasn't really planning on doing it, but I asked him. I said, "Listen, I've been accepted to these schools," and he said, "Tony," he says, and I had a rock band, and he knew that, and I played piano in the rock band and sang, and he said, "Listen, you go to Juilliard, in 5 years, you'll be the number 2 bassist in the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra." He says, "That's choice 1. Choice 2 is hit the road, and within 5 years, you'll be somewhere with all the pussy you can eat." And I said,
number 2.
That's not even a choice. And he says, "You're right. It's not. Go for it." But these were different days, man. It was 1970.
Yeah.
These are different days than we have now. And in 71, me and my buddy, the guitar player, went up to New Hampshire, and we'd heard about a singer up there, a lead singer. And I was always kind of on the fence if I was the singer. I played bass in the band, and we were like Poco. Mm-hmm. Or what the Eagles weren't there yet, but country rock and Neil Young influence and Poco actually the biggest influence.
Yeah.
So we had this country band, and we got signed. Now then I was I think 18, a year out of high school. First I got drafted, and got out of that with my mother knew a psychiatrist, wrote this letter what a horrible person I was, and drug addict, schizophrenia, and partially true letter, and whatever. So I had that experience of I got inducted. I got to the cup your hands and cough. I got all the way, the physical and everything.
Right.
Then the guy says, is there anybody in New Haven, Connecticut, with all the other inductees? This was in 1972. 3 more years for Vietnam to go.
Yep.
And this big old staff sergeant with all the jewelry, all the medals and everything, stood up and says, is there anybody here that thinks there's a reason to not serve Uncle Sam? And I pulled out my letter and went and had a chat with him in his office. He said, Anthony, I'm not sure you're the right material for the United States Army. And I said, gee, sir, that's a disappointment. And so I got out of it.
That broke your heart, didn't it?
Broke my heart, damn it. But this letter just ascribed every mental illness and physical addiction that's possible to me. So like it was 50% true. So gay, it says gay, and that was like not a hip thing like it is now. That was like awful back in the day and all that. And I won't get into that. That's disgusting.
And now your wife confirms all your mental issues now, correct?
Not only that, she says it in German, so you didn't understand. So.
Right.
But I didn't shit my pants like Ted Nugent, but pretty close. So anyway, being in the right place at the right time, we met a guy in Westport. He came back from New Hampshire down to the Westport area, which is about 300 miles. After a year of writing songs and a trio, we were a trio. And then we added a drummer and a bass player. We met a guy who knew a guy in New York City and a record executive for ABC Daniel. And he came out to where we were living and playing. He heard us play. He signed us. This huge deal. And he said, okay, kids, you're all going to Hollywood. So, okay. And we get to Los Angeles. They put us up for 7 months in the Chateau Marmont Hotel, one of these bungalows. The high point of that was the actress Carol Lindley, who was hot stuff in the 70s, would get up before she thought anybody else was up and swim naked in the swimming pool. Okay. Of course, I caught out of that really quick, and we would be sitting there like hiding behind the bushes watching old Carol do her thing at 5 a.m. in the swimming pool of the Chateau Marmont Hotel. Anyway, that was a disaster. They gave us, as a producer, Gary Cass, who produced Steely Dan, and was legendary for hiring and firing session bands. He would, if you research Gary Cass a little bit, they were perfectionist is not even the word. He would hire the 5 A-list guys, 5 of the 8 first call session guys, to play a Steely Dan song. And then the next day, he would hire 5 new guys to play the same song. And then these guys are getting like triple scale, which at the time, that means like $1,000 in 1970.
A lot of money.
Tons of money. These guys were rich. But, I played with the Beccaro brothers and Lee Sklar and Skunk Baxter and I forget the names, the guy that played the great Steely Dan solos, whatever. Mm-hmm. All these guys. And we couldn't get the record done because, and I mentioned Tom Petty before, he was lucky enough to get signed, I think, by Warner's, and they gave him Ted Templeman as a producer. And Ted Templeman liked the band, and he liked what they'd signed, but they'd never been in a studio. So Tom Petty told a story that they did breakdown at least 100 takes, over, several days to get that first song before Ted says, okay, now we got something. And the ABC Daniel was approach was, the first thing Gary Cass did was fire the drummer and bass player and wouldn't let the 2 other guys play on the record. I was allowed to play keyboards.
Okay.
And we never got anything finished. I mean, they signed the band based on the charm that we'd had. So logically, I would have hoped for a Ted Templeman, and we'd gone in the studio and learned how to do it to his satisfaction, sure. And then we would have had something because we were more along the lines of America, say like a trio,
okay,
and that kind of thing. And because I'm versatile, we were at a rehearsal studio in Hollywood, SIR rehearsal studio, which is where everybody rehearsed. And it was Jeff Beccaro was playing drums, his brother Mike was playing bass, and our 2 guitarists and me on Hammond. And Ritchie Blackmore was 2 studios over. And I play really, really loud Hammond. And he was looking for a keyboard player. He had Rainbow all put together minus a keyboard player. So he heard me play through 5 walls in these soundproof walls. That's how loud I was.
Right.
And he sent somebody over. He sent Jimmy over, the bass player, Jimmy Bain over, to say, listen, would you like to audition for Rainbow? And we'd been in L.A. for 2 years, and we didn't have anything finished on the record. And no land in sight. So I jumped ship. So I called my dad the night before my audition. I said, hey, Dad, I'm going to be a rock star. And my dad says, he was funny. He says, I thought you already were. And I said, no, I mean a real one. He says, well, good luck with that. I said,
right.
Okay, thanks, Pop.
Yep.
And the next day I went down and got the job with Ritchie. And then got to see the world. And I wasn't 20. I think I was 19.
That's an amazing story. And I think that was sometime around 1976, was it not?
75.
75, okay.
And we actually, not everybody knows this, but we did a whole tour of America. We played in Florida, we played in Miami, we played in Detroit, we played in Montreal, we played in Texas somewhere. We played about 9 or 10 shows just to warm up. And then we went into the studio in December of 75 or March or January or something. Maybe February.
Sure. Winter
in Germany, because we went into the studio in Munich and recorded Rainbow Rising. And that was the beginning of 1976.
Now, you did, I think, was it two world tours with Rainbow? And this was the time when Ronnie James Dio and Cozy Powell were in the band.
Yeah.
What a lineup. Now, for a musician of your caliber, we talked about the Juilliard and First Seat and all this kind of stuff, which is really cool to find out about you. What is it like for a young kid, I guess at this time in your early 20s, to play with world-renowned, what I guess later became world-renowned musicians, right? I mean, what was...
Well, Ritchie was world-renowned, and Cozy already had Cozy, and Cozy was huge. He'd had hit singles in England. And he was like a real catch for Ritchie. Cozy was in Europe already a big deal. What was it like? I gotta say, with all modesty, because I am modest, I thought it was fit. I thought it was right. I didn't ever give it a second thought. I'm not. I mean, some people would. Muhammad Ali would impress me, like a hero. Mm-hmm. But there isn't a musician that. I take that seriously. I mean, I appreciate their talent and all that.
Sure.
But these are just guys doing the same thing I do, basically. Yeah. I've always thought that way. I'm trying to say that in a way that doesn't make me out to be like, oh, well, I deserve this, because it's all about being in the right place at the right time. Well, but I was a good fit. I was a good fit for the band. They tried everybody. They tried Mark Stein from Vanilla Fudge. They tried the guy from Roxy Music. They tried some Italian guy who was hotshot. They tried every Hammond player they could find to fill John Lord's shoes, basically. Mm-hmm. And I was there, and they heard me by accident, and I could do it, and I didn't mind genre hopping because it's all music. And it was, it was a great experience. You got to see the world.
Yeah. What were you playing? Three Blind Mice? Is that what they heard in the recording studio there?
Must have been, or maybe Christmas carols. I don't know.
It doesn't even matter, does it?
Some fast, flashy shit. I tell you that.
Doesn't even matter.
That band was high energy. And when I listen back to the recordings of the band at that time, we played everything about 3 times too fast. And rule of thumb is, if you have a heavy song and you want to be a heavy band, the slower you play it, the heavier it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, really. And the tempo of Man on a Silver Mountain on the original record was slow and heavy. And we played it like a Mickey Mouse version, like way too fast. Yeah. But it was loud. It was energetic. We had a vibe. The kids loved it. The fans loved it.
It's funny that you mentioned that, the high energy, the look and everything. And yesterday, I just saw an interview with Ritchie Blackmore talking about Graham Bonnet, who we spoke of pre-hitting the record button. And I think Ritchie was just stayed pissed off with Graham, because Graham, he told Graham, You've got to grow your fucking hair out. We have an image. You need a denim. We're a denim, long-haired, rough-looking band, and you come in here looking like a Sears and Roebuck fucking sales guy, right?
Yeah.
Grow your hair out.
And like a gigolo or a professional son-in-law.
and he was saying that he made one of his tour people guard Graham's door because Graham was
Colin Hart
guarding the door to keep him from going out to get a haircut, and he snuck out the fucking window and got the haircut anyway.
Graham went out the window, stuck his thumb out, got a ride to a hairdresser somewhere, and got his neat look back. You know, and he come and wore the red pants. He had red pants. You know, we all had like satin flares and and platform soles. Graham was Australian, and his idea of what a pop musician looked like was not what the rough rock and roll look. You know,
right?
And this is hilarious.
And I think that Ritchie was what pissed him off even more is that he said that his hair had actually got to the length of his collar. It was actually getting long, right? And he went out and cut the shit. So
and Colin got unendless buckets of shit for that. And he says, "Well, man, I didn't think about the window."
That's funny.
I'm standing in front. He set up a chair in front of his door, and he's reading a book or whatever. And Graham snuck out the window. That's a legendary story.
And you know what the funniest part of the story was? He said on stage that night, he's sitting there playing, his guitar behind Graham as Graham's singing. And he looks and he sees that neatly cut hairline. And he said, I just wanted to smash that motherfucker over the back of the head with my guitar.
I love that. That's great stuff. And I've known Graham now I've known him forever. And he's a great guy and he's funny. But I mean, you don't tell him what to do, especially about his hair. I mean, and he wasn't that impressed. He'd been an up and coming, fairly successful pop star in Australia, and he'd already had hits. And this crazy Englishman calls him up and he's a singer. So I'll try it out. But Graham's Graham. Mm-hmm. He looked the way he looked.
Yeah.
Then they played this huge festival, Donington, I guess, in England, with his red trousers. And I knew that was going to be the end. I think that was his last gig.
The red trousers did it, right?
The red trousers gig was the end of the road for old Graham.
That's right. Well, you left Rainbow, I believe, sometime around 77 and moved to 77 and moved to Germany around 78, which is where you still reside today. And it's interesting because all this stuff that we've talked about takes place before you even hit the age of 25. This is crazy, right?
Yeah. I know.
Jeez, you've already lived a lifetime by the time you're 25 years old, right?
Yeah, well, one thing I'm thankful for is having, like I said, seen the world and all. I met people in Munich, and one of the people I met in Munich was quite successful musician here and producer, and I was left Rainbow. I wasn't fired, by the way, from Rainbow. He fired me a couple of times, and then this is really funny too. Couldn't find anybody to replace me, so I had to hire me back. Not that he do it himself. He had to have Colin Hart come hire me back, and I was like naive enough to say, "Yeah, what the fuck." Mm-hmm. But the last time I left, things got crazy, and I left during the recording of "Long Live Rock and Roll," which was in France at the Honky Chateau. Mm-hmm. And things got really nuts, and things got dangerous, and these guys are crazy. And so I left. So I'm back in the States, and I get a telegram. Remember those?
Yeah.
For this guy in Munich, and he says, "Can you come over and play piano on an album I'm producing?" I said, "Hell yes, if you send me a ticket." We didn't even talk about money. I didn't care. Still don't. Money makes itself if you're in the right place at the right time.
Sure.
And if you write the song.
Exactly.
Over that. So I got on a plane and August 11, 1978, and strolled into this the same studio where we recorded Rainbow Rising, which was Musicland in Munich. So I was intimately familiar with the staff, the hotel, the people. It was in the basement of the hotel, still is. it had been Giorgio Moroder's disco studio. He discovered Donna Summer and did
Interesting.
Love to Love You Baby in that studio. And then the Rockers discovered it, and I think Bad Company was there. Led Zeppelin might have been there. We were there. Queen was there. And this guy who sent me the telegram was there. So all of a sudden I'm back pretty much on home turf to me because, it's just a thing. And so I hit on the girl, the bar girl from the Hard Rock Cafe in Frankfurt, which is another story. And I had a lot of competition. David Coverdale was after her, and Mick Ralphs was after her. I mean, flirting with her from Bad Company. And I don't know what I was thinking. I married her. And
you win, right?
I don't know what I was thinking.
Right.
And that lasted as long as it lasted, which was actually quite a while. But what I got out of it is my daughter is, she's 41 now, and she's got my grandchild who will be 6.
Okay, perfect.
Next week, and I'll be down in Munich.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what I got out of it. And then I seemed to be the marrying kind. And then I got 3 kids now, and they're all German to the core, and they speak English because of me, but they're German.
Sure.
So we get up to Frankfurt, and a guy had a studio that was pretty much booked except for nights when the sessions, when everybody had gone home, and he let me go in with a cassette recorder and play the piano all night long if I wanted, and just record shit, just record anything I wanted to. And I was like learning by doing. And then that escalated to where he would let me actually have sessions with an engineer. And I recorded 5 electronic music albums, more than that, but we released 5 where I didn't even sing.
Wow.
And I wasn't sure if I was going to be a songwriter. These were like in the vein of Kraftwerk or Tangerine Dream, but it wasn't. It was more like silly electro pop.
Yep.
And I was having a ball because there was all these synthesizers, and I was having a great time. The polar opposite of either the country rock where I started or hard rock where I, landed.
Sure, yeah.
The complete opposite thing. So I'm making demos for a girl group that was a complete invented product, like Milli Vanilli.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the girls were cast. They didn't sing.
Okay.
They were just there to look pretty. There was 3 of them. And I'm making demos for them and singing them. And I played them for another producer, Frank Farian, who did Milli Vanilli and got tons of shit for that. But he also did I don't know if you've heard of Boney M.
I know.
But they were huge over here and in Africa, okay. and they sold 300 million records. Gee. And enormous. Mm-hmm. And so I was visiting his studio. He was not far. And I played him these demos. He says, "What are you talking about? Girl groups? Those are hits." I said, "Yeah, really?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Who should sing them?" He said, "You, those are hits. What are you talking about?" So we shopped them and got a deal with Rockshire Records, okay. where Graham Bonnet also got his deal with Alcatraz. And these stories get wild. So got an album deal with Rockshire Records. So they flew me first class. This is a brand new record label.
Okay.
Put me up at the Sunset Strip at the Hyatt House, the Continental Hyatt House, the Riot House. Picked me up in a stretch limo, drove me down to Anaheim, where they had this office complex, this state-of-the-art studio, and even me, in my naivete, was thinking, this is a brand new record label. Where's the billionaire? Right. And it turns out that the guy's wife was the comptroller of Hughes Aircraft, and she embezzled $10 million from Hughes Aircraft to fund Rockshire Records. And they signed Alcatraz with Amy Malmsteen and Graham Bonnet. They signed me. And I had the biggest hit. I Won't Be Home Tonight was on Rockshire Records. And that was the single. And it was on all over the radio. And then they all went to jail.
Jesus.
And if you're listening to this podcast, Google Rockshire Records. That's ROC Shire, Shire, like The Hobbit, Rockshire Records. And this is a fascinating story. And they all ended up going to jail. So the owner of the master of I Won't Be Home Tonight, my first hit single in America, is the Internal Revenue Service.
No way.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Jesus.
I mean, I've had a crazy run.
So are they getting mailbox money every time this record's played?
I don't get shit. I don't get anything.
Uncle Sam's getting it all right. Yeah.
Uncle Sam's getting it. They finally caught me.
Was this Hughes aircraft or airlines? This was the Howard Hughes spinoff or whatever it was, right?
Yes.
Howard Hughes.
Well,
okay.
Hughes, remember he was into planes and flying.
Sure.
You saw the movie with Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
And he was into planes and flying, and he had an aircraft company, and I guess they built planes for the military in the Second World War.
Yeah. Wow.
Or after, I don't know when Howard Hughes was, but in the 50s at least. And this was the 70s, and it was Hughes aircraft, and they did government work, of course.
Okay.
And she was the person that signed all the paychecks and had actually the comptroller. So she started writing checks to Rocky Davis. That was her. She was Shirley Davis, and she started writing checks to her husband, and for $10 million in total. And that's where the limo and the recording studio and the big advance they paid me and Graham's band and two others. I don't remember who they were. And, the singer from Tower of Power, they signed him too. But none of them had any success except me. And Won't Be Home Tonight was all over the radio. Wow. And there's still people talk to me all the time about that song. If it was an MTV video even, there were, how do I say this and sound as pristine as I am? Well, there was all that stuff you could eat that I mentioned an hour ago. And then a lot of substances.
Yeah, sure. And then some, right? Yeah.
And then it's just turned up out of nowhere in my room service and all the time. And it was just nuts.
Well, it sounds like it was fun while it lasted, but it sounded a little short-lived, right?
What do you mean they're in jail?
You're right.
What? And I said, I knew there, and I did. I said, I knew there was something fishy.
Something, yeah. Too good to be true, right? The old adage.
Brand new label. You expect somebody to pick you up in a Chevy Impala, with bad brakes. But,
Exactly.
Stretch the limo and all this.
How funny. You had some charting success while, you were in Rainbow, but you also had charting success after leaving and going solo. I think the first album from the Planet P project peaked around 42 on the Billboard Top 200. And then you had the song Why Me? I think that was that the first single from Planet P that went to 64?
But before that, I Won't Be Home Tonight was 79 on the Hot 100.
Okay. So it was that song that really kicked off your solo thing. It wasn't Why Me that kicked you off, was it?
No. This is another kind of crazy story. Planet P was signed to Geffen Records, which was the most powerful record company in the industry in the 80s. And the A&R guy, I won't say his name twice. You'll get that if you know who I'm talking about. But this guy came over and signed Planet P, but at the same time I had my rock album. Planet P was a space opera, and so I had two record deals, one with Rockshire, which had already charted, and then one on Geffen. And the understanding was that I wasn't allowed to use my image, my face, for Planet P. That's why I'm not in the video. There's 3 videos. That's why I'm not in the MTV video. And a very unusual situation, but I was just writing all this stuff. I was in the studio 24 hours a day, and I never really cared much about genre. And one day I said, hey, I want to write a space opera, which I did, and I got signed to Geffen, and then Why Me exploded, and it was in the top 10 radio charts, which I always thought were more reflective of what I was doing than the actual pop charts, because I'm not a pop artist, but I was on the radio a lot. And then Geffen had the option to release the Some Tough City record, which had a Fine Fine Day and the First Day of Summer, both top 40 hits on it. And this guy whose name shall not be mentioned, hated the lyrics and wanted me to change the lyrics. He wanted me to call A Fine, Fine Day something else. And he didn't like the line, on the first day of summer, the whole world knows your name, which I thought was pretty literate, and I liked it. And I also liked A Fine, Fine Day. So they traded me like a baseball player or an old mule to MCA Records.
Really?
Who, yeah. And, without my knowledge, really, or I heard something's going on. And so MCA Records was Irving Azoff. It was also a huge label in the 80s, released Some Tough City. And A Fine, Fine Day was number one in the radio charts. And I kind of stuck it to Ritchie a little bit because Stone Cold had been number one in the radio chart.
Yeah, and that was back in the Joe Lynn Turner days, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Joe's a buddy of mine too. They were all friends. I kind of felt good about that it was number one in the radio charts. But then the single was 22 with a Bullet, then and number one in the radio charts, and then lost a bullet and disappeared. And I suspect, I know, that this really, really powerful guy that was pissed off at me for not changing the lyrics had his finger in that, because that's how influential Geffen Records was in the early 80s.
Wow.
And this is the label that resurrected Aerosmith, and they had Missing You with John Waite, and they had resurrected Whitesnake.
Yeah.
And same guy. And
wasn't
the Guru?
Yeah. I was thinking, wasn't Guns N' Roses on that label, Geffen Records?
Yes, they were. Yeah. And this is the same guy that A&R'd them.
Okay.
And he was used to, like, everybody saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. And I wouldn't change the lyrics. And I wouldn't. And they also wanted to cut the whole bridge out of Fine, Fine Day, which would have ruined the meaning of the song and made it a comfortable 3.5 minutes. It was a minute longer. And so I think he tanked it. I think he had it tanked, because 22 with a bullet, and then the bullet goes away and the singer starts to drop. There's somebody's talking to somebody, but that's the way it is. And then the first day of summer followed that, and that was top 40 as well. I was all over MTV, and if you notice, there's lots of really pretty girls in a swimming pool in that video, and none of them has a tattoo.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you don't see that anymore.
No, you don't. Why was it important to have no face? What was the idea behind that?
Well, I had 2 concepts, 2 record deals on competing labels.
Was that your decision or was that their decision?
Their decision.
Okay.
I was up for anything. For me, it's all music, and I'll promote it. But they said, no, we can't do that. It's too confusing. Is he a rocker, with I Won't Be Home Tonight, or is he the new Pink Floyd with Why Me, And the thing about Why Me is about an astronaut, and they're counting down, and he has a panic attack. And he says, I don't really want to be here. And I mean, it's all a joke. And every Planet P lyric was tongue in cheek, and not a ha-ha joke, but steeped in irony, as they say.
Yeah.
Like the guy says, hey, let me out of here. And he said, there must be 1,000 other guys, 1,000 other ways to look good in your eyes. He's doing this to make so his girlfriend will think he's a hot shot. And then they're counting down. He has a panic attack. So
wow. Well, you mentioned that, and you had a hit with the song back in 1984 off of the Some Tough City record, and I wanted to share just a quick clip. We talked about A Fine, Fine Day, and I wanted to share that with the listeners, and then come back and chat just a little bit more about that particular song.
This is just audio, right? They're not going to see the video.
Nope, no video, just audio clip.
Okay, because the video was a trip too.
Yeah.
Okay. Audio.
All right.
I'll see you when we're back.
All right. Sounds good.
Sometime after that, he finally disappeared for good. When he pulled that old Houdini, like we always knew he would. It's a fine, fine day for a reunion. It's a fine, fine day for coming home. You did your sitting, you did hard time.
I was going to tell you that I saw you open for Night Ranger in, I think it was the Lake Charles Civic Center in Lake Charles, Louisiana, back in 1985. And my buddy Scott Ducote from Lafayette, I was going to school at USL in Lafayette at the time, and we still talk about that show today. So,
cool.
Yeah, it's been a long
Night
time.
Ranger or me?
What's that?
Me or Night Ranger?
What was your
You
question?
talk about me or you talk about Night
Oh,
Ranger?
no, we're talking about it was Tony Carey and Planet P that was opening for Night Ranger. Yeah, it was a great show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the characters in the song. First of all, are the characters in the song real people or no? A fine day.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Now, if you ask me,
That song specifically, though.
which one?
A fine day.
No, but I've always had an affinity for people with a light criminal bent.
I knew it.
I've hung around with a lot of Hell's Angels. Not anymore. I'll preface this by saying I've been sober for 30 years and clean since 1994. 30 years, excuse me. 29 years, excuse me.
Before you get into telling me about the song, I want to see if what I think is correct before you say it. But go ahead.
For it.
Okay. So I'm a huge Mafia buff. Okay. Yeah. This song sounds like it was written with an old Mafia boss by the name of Sonny Francis in mind. And
no.
So I'm off. So
I've seen his YouTube channel.
Sure. So that's his son, Michael Francis.
Oh, okay.
But Sonny was the head of the Colombo family. But everything in the song, Tony, sounds like, took off his fedora, stuck his fingers in the, crown. It's like he's coming out of prison, and then he pulls that old Houdini, like we always knew, like he's, reuniting with people coming out of the pen after getting pinched for his crimes. So that's what for years I said, I wonder if he's writing with a mafia person in mind, right?
Actually, I wasn't, and I didn't have an Uncle Sonny, but Sonny was to me, and I hadn't heard of Sonny Francis when I was writing Subtle City, but Sonny seemed to me to be like a mafia name.
Okay, all right.
And obviously he embezzled the money or did whatever, and they were after him. And he gets into a taxi cab, he says, pulled out $20. Keep that meter running till the $20 mark, and that got him all the way to Central Park for the bus station. So these are definitely the old days.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, I wrote about a lot of the whole album's about criminals because I saw shit in L.A. I lived in West Hollywood, and what's now after the ABC Dunhill days, I took an apartment on Sunset Boulevard in what's now the Hotel Mondrian.
Okay.
And this really hip hotel. But it used to be 8440 Sunset, and it was like a whorehouse / drug cartel place on Sunset Boulevard, and I had an apartment there. Rod Stewart lived there for a while. It's just full. People come and go, all kinds of crazy people in the 70s, people on the Sunset Strip. So I saw all kinds of stuff, and I met all kinds of people. And I've always had these bikers and these tough guys. They're like little wimpy rock stars and rock guys. They're like we're like mascots.
Okay.
Sometimes to them, like the guys who are going to do security for the Stones, the Angels.
Yeah.
Like Mick Jagger, the little pretty boy, prancing around. But he's got the Hell's Angels with pool cues behind him. He can say anything he wants.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. So all of my buddies, and my oldest and dearest friend is. After he got out of prison, I had to wait 4 years before I saw him again. But we've been buddies for 35 years, and he was a biker, was an angel, and so no, this wasn't written about the Colombo family boss, but it could have been.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was funny because I just reunited with that buddy of mine I was telling you about here in Houston. There was a band out of Louisiana that was playing a show here by the name of Zebra. And Scott and I were huge Zebra fans, and it was almost like when we reunited. I haven't seen him in years. Reunited, gave each other a hug, and said, "Man, do you remember that show we saw at the Lake Charles Civic Center in Louisiana?" I'm like, "Yeah, Tony Carey and Night Ranger," and we kind of both started singing, "It's a fine, fine day." Cool. Yeah, good times for sure.
I love it, man.
So hitting the fast forward button a little bit on you.
Yeah.
2009 rolls around, and I'm sure it becomes one of maybe the hardest and darkest times of your life. I'm quite sure.
No, all I did was get cancer.
That's it.
There's
nothing. Oh, okay. I was thinking it was some big deal you were going through or something.
There's nothing dark about that. I got sick. And you know what? I tell you what. I saw some blood where there shouldn't be any blood.
Okay.
I went to my doctor. He says, "You probably got a bladder infection." I said, "Okay." It wasn't a bladder infection. And I said, How scared should I be, Doc, on a 10 scale? He says, 2. He was a buddy. So, but you got to take all these tests. This is a process to find out what you got. And I'm not to describe the final process, but it involves having a camera inside your bladder. Now, there's only one way it can get there.
Sure.
So, whatever.
And it's not through your mouth either, is it?
It doesn't go through your mouth. It doesn't go through your bottom. So, Anyway, it goes through another place that the sun doesn't shine. So anyway, I got the diagnosis. My father had died of prostate cancer because he was an idiot, and he tried he was a scientist, and he tried this experimental. They implanted radioactive pellets around his prostate, and it melted him, and he died awfully. So I finally got the diagnosis, and it took about 3 months with a bunch of tests going from specialist to specialist. So the guy said, "You got 2 tumors in your bladder," and they were inside the bladder. They hadn't spread or anything like that. And I said, "Great. What's the next hospital that does this kind of operation?" And he gave me 2 phone numbers, and I called one, and the first one was full, and the second one took me 3 days later. 3 days later, I was on the table, and they took my bladder out, and then I was cancer-free. They made a mess of it and had to do a second operation a week later. So I was, weak and stuff.
Sure.
But cancer-free, and I went through the tube, the MRI, what's it in English? It's MRI in English. Mm-hmm. It's something else here, but that with they shoot you with a contrast fluid.
Yeah.
So I went through it like 4 or 5 times, and if there had been a cancer cell, it would have lit up like a Christmas tree,
Yeah, sure.
So I was absolutely cancer-free. So that was, fuck it. I mean, if this cancer, cut the fucker out. I mean, lose it.
Yeah.
Which I did. Like 3 days, as soon as I could get an appointment, which is luckily 3 days later. So nothing escaped the inside of my bladder. There were 2 enormous tumors. I saw a picture of it. And one overlapping the other, and it was days, weeks, months from exploding, and then it goes into your bones, and that's the worst way to go that there is. I mean, that's like being lit on fire.
Yeah,
and it goes into your brain, and it's miserable.
So there were more than like five surgeries or so that you had to have
I had 5. Yeah,
5. Yeah,
and but hell, I mean, they say the body doesn't remember pain. It remembers the good time. They do say that. They being somebody. I mean, I read it somewhere. And so 2009, and I was in a band with Joe Lynn Turner, not a band, we were a project for a while for fun, with Joe Lynn Turner and Richie's son, Jürgen, called Over the Rainbow. And we were playing, we toured Russia. We toured all the way back to Kazakhstan. And had a crazy time. That was amazing because I could really see it in the world. Played Moscow, St. Petersburg, and then way back, and we had 10 shows in Russia. Greg Smith who'd been a Rainbow bassist, and Bobby Rondinelli were in the band, who'd been a Rainbow drummer. And so I got the diagnosis, and so I had to leave that project. Did 3 operations then. Finally got me patched up. I was weak, and I wasn't sure I was going to survive it because I got sepsis, which is this infection. I've had sepsis 4 times.
Jesus.
And here I am. This is like crazy. And sepsis is like...
You've got 3 lives left, Tony.
You know? Meow. Meow,
yeah,
bitch.
meow.
So, anyway, so this is 2009, so I was not in any shape to do much, except I have a studio. So I recorded my bucket list records. I did 2 records called Stanislaus County Kid, which is where I'm from. Turlock's in Stanislaus County, California. Mm-hmm. And I am a Stanislaus County kid, and I am actually a country singer. And I did Willie Nelson covers and some soul covers, and I did 2 albums of that. I did an album of church Christmas music, but not like a pop album, but like really solemn, like you sing in the church, the first Noel, Silent Night, the things I grew up with in church.
You're like a musical. You're like a musical mutt, aren't you? You're like.
You know what? I wrote a list because I knew I was going to be talking to you. I wrote a list of my influences, and I gave up at Merle Haggard.
You just said fuck it. Huh?
Here it is.
What?
And
wow,
folks, I just showed Randy a crazy list of people, but the people that have influenced me would be the outlaw country, which is Willie and Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings. The keyboard players, I stole everything I do from Greg Allman and Ray Manzarek and Elton John and Floyd Kramer, and going way back. It's the first country piano player. And I don't know. I mean, that's a complete mutt. And it's funny to me looking back, like when a guy, say Ricthie, who, you know, comes from Deep Purple, which is, you know, hard rock, semi-classically tinged, loud, aggressive band. And I said, oh, I can do that. So I did that. And it's completely out of character. Yeah. And then my favorite piano player probably in the world is Roy Bittan from the E Street Band. Yeah,
sure.
My favorite song in the world is probably Thunder Road, which is I think Rolling Stone agrees with me. It's the best song I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. This is funny. When we were in Munich recording Rising, and I was listening to Born to Run, and then we were in France listening to recording Long Live Rock and Roll with Rainbow, and I was listening to Rumors by Fleetwood Mac.
Wow.
And just all over the map. And as far as keyboard players go, my favorites are the guys that don't show off. Richard Wright from Pink Floyd. Mm-hmm. His name escapes me. Who's the keyboard player in Genesis? What's his name?
Oh, Tony Banks.
Tony Banks.
Yeah, Banks.
Just brilliant because he plays really simple stuff that just works. The best recorded Hammond organ still to this day, it'll never be topped, is A Whiter Shade of Pale, Matthew Fisher.
Yeah.
And these are just the simple stuff.
Procol Harum, right?
And Ray Manzarek's Riders on the Storm. I mean, this is perfect. It is perfect in every way for me. And I was never impressed by John Lord, Keith Emerson, Brian Auger, these
fancy players, right?
Listen, I knew John Lord. He's a great guy, wonderful guy, great musician. I'm not even being critical, but it's not my style.
Yeah.
My style is simple and with some swing. And there's a difference between hard rock that in your face and some kind of subtle swing. And the Doors swung.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was always a huge REO Speedwagon fan.
Yeah.
And one of the draws for me to that band was the playing of Neil Doughty, the keyboard player. When he fired up that Hammond, that Hammond, it stood out like a sore thumb, and man, it sounded good. You think of songs like Roll with the Changes, and it features that Hammond in there. It's like amazing. Yeah. Like, I love that sound.
Another fabulous Hammond that was even earlier than that, 60s Hammond, was Steppenwolf.
Oh, sure.
On Magic Carpet Ride and their Born to Be Wild. The Hammond is astounding.
Yep.
And Mark Stein with the Vanilla Fudge on You Keep Me Hanging On. There's like 5 notes in this introduction, and it's it's heaven. That was Carmen Apice, Mark Stein, and who else was in Vanilla Fudge? But that stuff all blew my mind, and it was complete the influences.
Yes.
Then in 1971, Miles Davis released Bitches Brew,
mm-hmm.
and that was a double album with 4 songs on it. Rainbow Live on Stage is a double album with 6 songs on it, and 2 of them are short. The idea being that you get musicians and you don't play the same thing twice. And Miles would call up Miles Davis, brilliant, and especially brilliant in the groups he'd put together. And he'd call people up. He'd say, we got a session, be at Columbia Studios, in New York City at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever, and we're going to play. And these songs are 15 minutes long, and
mm-hmm.
they only played it once, and it'll never happen that way again.
No.
Nobody was reading charts. It's improvisation.
Sure.
I've never played a song the same way twice in my life. I understand why Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, hell, even Bruce or AC/DC, they're so popular they can only play football stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
They can only play for 100,000 people.
Right.
And I understand that's a show. Rammstein, it's the best band in town.
Mm-hmm.
They're so big they can only play open air for like a lot of people. And the show is down. If you're standing in the wrong place, you're going to get blown up by the pyro.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their marker.
Yep.
And the show has to run like it has to run. And these days, these shows run from a computer. They run from a laptop, and the drummer's got a click in his ear.
Yep.
And there's cues, and everything is exactly the same every night. And I get that at show business.
But you weren't doing that back in the day.
But it's not rock and roll.
Right. Yeah. A little rehearsed, what's going on these days.
Rehearsed down to the last burp.
Sure.
That is show business. I get it.
Yep.
Taylor Swift's a great songwriter. Ed Sheeran's a great songwriter. But it's not rock and roll. If you want rock and roll, you got to go to Oasis.
Yes. Well, I think it's
Oasis.
Yes. And I think it's really cool. You've dropped, you've talked about a lot of different artists, going back to Poco, and your influences and your style are very eclectic, which that's why I love the interview process, because I would have never guessed that. Of course, I detected a little bit, pop from you, rock guy, but there's some other genres of music that I would have never guessed that you would have dabbled in, right? So this is cool to learn this about you. And to walk back just really quick, when we were talking about the cancer earlier, your bandmate, I think Ronnie James Dio, he pretty much died from almost the same cancer that you had when he was,
His
66, 66?
Mine
okay.
was bladder.
Okay.
But thing is, he'd been having, I know Wendy, his wife, and we're not so much recently, but we were always in touch. And Ronnie had wanted me to go to Black Sabbath. I heard this like years and years later, and that would have ruined Black Sabbath. That was a non-starter. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have wanted to be in that band. But me and Ronnie were friends,
Mm-hmm.
and he suggested me for Black Sabbath. I knew that. Anyway, he had stomach cancer, and I had bladder cancer, and he's on the road drinking on an empty stomach, probably, or whatever, eating shitty road food. I know, I get it, and he's got this stomach pain. He waited too long to go to the doctor. I'll give you a worse example. Jimmy Bain, Rainbow's bass player, and then Dio's bass player. He died on a cruise ship in his cabin, didn't come out for the show on one of these rock cruises. He had undiagnosed lung cancer. Now, he's a Scottish guy living in America. If he'd stayed in Scotland, they would have found it.
Yeah.
He definitely didn't have health insurance, because he's one of these guys that didn't write the songs.
Yeah, no
he
money.
Was
right.
Driving a 15-year-old, Mercury Cougar or whatever, with no brakes and bald tires, and just like a journeyman rock guy.
Yeah.
And I've been in Germany for 44 years, and here, if you get sick, you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
and I never got a bill for anything. For 5 surgeries would drive most Americans into bankruptcy. And in fact, 70% of American bankruptcies are because of health problems, health-related problems. They're not failed businesses, just somebody gets sick and can't pay the $4 million bucks that they owe the hospital for the 5 surgeries. So whatever, when I heard that Jimmy had died, he had lung cancer and it wasn't diagnosed, it got me crazy. And I don't want to get into any kind of politics here, but in civilized countries, they give you health care.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my mom and dad just turned 80, and they have been pretty much at 80 years old. They're still healthy as horses for the most part.
Bodes well for you.
Yes, and we've always kind of teased them over the years about, Jesus, you're going to the doctor again? Yeah, we got to go just check this and check that. And we've always kind of picked on them a little bit. But I believe they're as healthy as they are because they did the preventative maintenance along the way. Thank God. And I think that's our public service announcement here for the listeners is when you have an ailment, don't look past it. You have to get checked out somehow because
I tell you what, you need your blood work done.
Sure.
You need your prostate checked from 50 on.
That's correct.
Regularly. You need a colonoscopy. They're no fun, but you need to have them look up there and see if you got anything going on. You need the blood work is super important.
Yes.
And if the thing is, do I feed my kids this month or do I get the blood work? What are you going to pick? And
I get it. Yeah.
It's awful.
Yes.
It's the rest of the world looks at, the greatest country on earth. And in many ways, America is the greatest country on earth. The rest of the world looks on in shock. I mean, in Norway and England and France, you don't pay anything. Mm-hmm. In Germany, I pay for my health insurance, but it's $300 a month or something. And if I had 8 kids, they'd all be on the same plan.
Sure.
It's like just one-time fee. I don't have children on it anymore, but I'm past that. But still, it's $300 a month, and if it's the most it could be is $600, and that's for millionaires.
Sure.
Like really, really rich guys.
Yes.
And I never got a bill.
Wow.
And in Norway, Great Britain, France, Sweden, it's nothing a month. It's just,
That's crazy.
Now I understand infrastructure, you got to pay for it somehow. And I understand having, spending $2 billion on an aircraft carrier. I kind of understand it. I'm okay, whatever. And we don't do that here, but at what cost, and there's how many million Americans don't have health insurance or are afraid to go to the doctor? And if they do go to the doctor, they go to an emergency room,
sure,
which isn't going to give, which they know they're going to skate on a bill because they can't pay it.
Yeah, and
the emergency room knows that too, but they won't turn them away. Yep. But that's not the care you need. That's not the level of concentration and everything.
Well, it's crazy. I was in a wreck in 2013 where I broke my neck in the wreck. Whoa. And just the ambulance ride back in 13 was like $13,000. And you spoke of it earlier. Like, if you don't have health insurance, you file for fucking bankrupt. I mean, who can afford that shit, right?
70% of BKs in America are medical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and these people, that means they ruin their credit rating, never buy a house, never get a cell phone.
Correct.
For however long it takes after a bankruptcy. The hospitals, the health industry writes it off because they're making obscene profits.
Yep.
One other thing is that the old trope of the Jewish mother says marry a doctor and all this because doctors in America make a lot of money. Here, my doctor drives an old Volkswagen. Mm-hmm. It's just a job. They do it because they're committed and that's what they want to do.
Sure.
But they're not rich.
Right.
I mean, maybe a plastic surgeon,
right.
Some exotic and German health insurance does not cover cosmetic surgery.
Exactly.
So maybe these guys are rich, but the doctors are just doctors. And I have a bunch of buddies that are doctors and they do it because they want to do it.
Sure.
I mean, they like the science. They like helping people. It's just whatever. You know?
Absolutely.
They're doctors. They're not lobster fishermen. They're doctors. You know?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in 2019, you put out a record called Lucky Us.
Yeah.
Well, what an amazing piece of work. I want to thank you for that music, because
I appreciate that, Randy.
you went to another place, I think, in your soul to write the material on this record, and it shows. Tell the listeners about the record and what inspired Lucky Us for Tony Carey.
Okay, if I'll continue what we're just talking about. If you've got health insurance and you can have 5 cancer surgeries and not get a bill, and if you've got a roof over your head, if you've got something to eat, and if you can heat your house, et cetera, apartment, whatever, if you've got a car to drive, if your kids are getting an education, if there's no war going on outside, you're lucky. I mean, there's 2 billion people that don't have enough to eat on the planet. This is astounding to me. And just to be in a position where I have a recording studio upstairs. I'm on the ground floor. In the attic is a really, really cool recording studio. Lucky me, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the right place, the right time. I could have been born in Somalia.
Yes.
And they don't even have a government there. It's a warlord outlaw state. And you know, Richard Bona, he's the world's best bass player. He's Quincy Jones manages him, and this is in the jazz world. He's from Cameroon.
Okay.
And that's one of the poorest countries in the world. And he got out, lucky him, because he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And he lives in Miami, and he's doing fine, and he's world famous, and he's a beautiful guy, and he makes beautiful music. But he's a black African from the poorest country in the world. The streets aren't paved. It's all mud and disease and mosquitoes and malaria. And so there's this basic concept of lucky us. And that would be like, in this case, me and my wife, Marion.
Yes,
and
sure.
The song, Lucky Us, is about me and Marion.
Okay.
But the overriding concept of the album is, if you've got the basic survival needs and you got enough money to buy groceries and whatever, go to the doctor.
We're way ahead of the
lucky.
curve, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're rich. You're already lucky and rich. And stop bitching, basically.
Yep.
So that being said, Lucky Us, as you know, is only piano and some orchestra.
Yes.
And my voice.
Yep.
And it's 100% autobiographical. And I mentioned this, I think, before we were on the air. I've published 1,200 songs. And I would pretty much split them into the ones that are real and the ones that aren't real. None of them are lies, but some of them are just songs, you know?
Sure.
And some of them are really real, and they're the ones that I think are important. And not important. They're important to me. And the ones I think are realized.
Yep.
Lucky Us took me 4 years to make, because it started off with drums, bass, guitar, choirs, brass, you know, the kitchen sink production.
All the things you didn't even need, right?
Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing. And I kept taking stuff away. And then I heard a couple of Bruce's records. I went back and listened to Nebraska again. It was just him on a cassette player. And then I saw Bruce Springsteen's a big, huge influence on me and my generation. He's a New Jersey kid, and he writes about working, because he never worked in a factory, so whatever. And he admits that, you know, he's kind of I don't want to say a phony, but he's an inventor. He invents his characters.
Sure.
But in Lucky Us, every word of it is true, and it's autobiographical. And I kept taking stuff away till I finally said, you know what, fuck it. I took everything away. I think there's a small percussion part in one song, and there's a trumpet on a song from a friend of mine, Dutch trumpeter. On The Wind, there's a trumpet. But other than that, it's piano, my voice, and some orchestra. And that took me 4 years to make.
Wow.
And of the 10 songs that made it to the record, I wrote 50 or 60 that are still in folders on my desktop and the computer. And it just took fucking forever. Wow. And I really wanted... I know I'm not going to make that many more records. I'm going to make the next one I make is going to surprise the shit out of you. But talk about genre hopping, but I know I'm not going to make that many more records. I've made 30 or 40 and produced 30 or 40 more for other artists. And I really, really wanted this one to be honest.
Yeah.
To me, honest. And thank you for the compliment. That means
Absolutely.
so much to me. I mean, if you tell me you like Planet P, I say, great, I like it too, but it's science fiction, you know?
Yeah.
And Lucky Us is like the story of my life from when I was a little kid to through all the Hollywood days and what happened later and the cancer, the song Hallelujah, I'm Alive. It's about waking up from, that was actually my first thought. I woke up from the anesthesia after the 4th surgery and I'd been in a coma for a week and my kidneys shut down and I had sepsis and septic shock and all the rest. And the chances of surviving that are, first of all, 50-50.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the just in the ICU of walking out of there is 50-50. And then 60% of people that survive that are dead within 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's an aggregate total of 80% of the people that have this experience are dead within 5 years. And this is, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
Here I am.
I could detect, and I don't know how or what even gives me the right to say this, to be honest with you, but when I first reached out to you and started trying to pick you up as somebody to talk to on my show, I started just going back and listening to your catalog. Yeah. And somehow I stumbled across Hallelujah, I'm Alive on YouTube, where it was just you and the Steinway, right? Yeah. And it took on a whole different meaning than everything I've ever heard you do. It was sincere. It was like, it was raw. It was you and the piano and that was it. And it's amazing music. And it was so great to me. I bought 2 of the Lucky Us vinyls. One is floating around in Germany somewhere, like I don't know where, and the other one is sitting right there.
Was you?
Yeah. So
that was you that bought the record?
Yes. So me and one other guy, right? But
thanks for that.
You're welcome. Yeah. I wanted to feature a song off the Lucky Us record, and this is a song called Hawkeye Road. Let's share this with the listeners, and then we'll come back and chat about Hawkeye Road.
The wars looked like they were over. Everybody seemed to have a job. My old man put us down in the high clover. 3 bedrooms on a 1/4-acre lot. And we were Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, Fort Apache in the orchard across the street. Out all day zooming round like rocket ships. My mom had only called us in to eat. And they say that you can never go home again. And if you do, there won't be anybody there. But I can still hear the choir in the church where we went. I can still smell summer in the air on Hawkeye Road.
That was Hawkeye Road. What an amazing song, Tony. And I have to tell you that when I spin that vinyl through that EV50 over there in the corner, man, that sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds really good.
I don't have a record player, and I don't have a CD player anymore.
No
I
kidding.
do actually. There's a little cheap one here, and there's one in the car, but CD's dead.
Yeah.
I never liked vinyl. I thought vinyl was best if you hold a lighter underneath it, you bend it up, make a Cheetos, you hold your Cheetos or your dip.
Right.
I never liked vinyl because you got to get up every 19 minutes and change the side.
That's the drawback to it. I go from listening to Spotify here in the studio, which is really nice because I can just sit here and stop it and start it when I want to.
Yeah.
But there was something really cool when I bought my first vinyl. I said, I'm going to start collecting vinyl. I don't know what inspired me to do that. Maybe I was just going through a midlife crisis. Who knows? Yeah. But I remember buying my first piece of vinyl, and it was so nostalgic to me to bust the wrapper on this thing and to hold a physical piece of music in my hands that I hadn't done since I was a kid.
Where you could actually read the liner notes.
Yes, and I've told this story ad nauseum. I was always the musical savant, the kid that bought the record, busted it open, and read the liner notes before I even put the music on the turntable. That was me, right? I wanted to know who played with Tony Carey, where did they record it, what year did it get I wanted to know all the behind the scenes stuff, right? That intrigued me for some reason. And most people, if you say, hey, who played Heart of the Night? I'd say, oh, well, that was Poco and blah, 77 or whatever. Most people would say, man, I've never even heard of that song. They've heard it a million times, but they don't know the title. Yeah, they don't know the players. They don't know anything about the detail of the music, right? Yeah. But where is Hawkeye Road?
It's in Turlock, California, and it's now called East Hawkeye Avenue, and it's a 4-lane. I mentioned Fort Apache. It had been a TV show in the 50s, and in the walnut orchard across the street from Hawkeye, where I'm not going to give the address because people will go and look at it, but it's on East Hawkeye Avenue now in Turlock, and there was a walnut orchard across the street, and me and my brother, my kid brother, it was still my best friend, my kid brother David. He's 66. We dug as far as we could dig with a shovel and put boards over the top, and that was Fort Apache. We were, 5, 6, and 4, or 7 and 5, so it was just kids.
Yeah.
And there's two points that you mentioned. First, to Hawkeye Road, it's a literary trope. You can never go home again, but it's really true. It's really about being in the moment because, I tell my life story, and that's true. And it says I got a real Lowry organ. Notice I didn't say a real Hammond organ. They were too expensive. We didn't have much money. A Lowry organ was a little home entertainment console that me and my older brother took apart and figured out how to plug it into a tiny guitar amplifier. That thing screamed like you were whipping a cat. It just was probably such an awful sound. I learned the first 2 Doors albums on that record. I was 14.
Wow.
And so every word of that is true, and you can't go home again. I have 2 of my dearest friends. I haven't seen them in over 50 years. Shout out to Mike and Phil Rojas, Turlock, California. Grew up with them. I mean, really grew up with them I knew them since I was 3 years old. And they're still there, and we still correspond. But the thing about vinyl, here's the thing about vinyl. The internet ruined the music business. I love the internet, but it ruined the music business because there is absolutely no mystique left. Anything you want to see, some idiot with an iPhone is filming, and it looks like shit, and sounds like shit, and it used to be Zeppelin, Bad Company, or Deep Purple, or Yes, or one of these Neil Young, these Crosby, Stills, and any of these bands. You didn't know much about them.
No.
And you'd wait for Rolling Stone or Cream magazine, if you're a rock fan, to come out, and you'd read something, and you'd look at the pictures a million times. The Allman Brothers, live at the Fillmore, 1971. They got this beautiful album cover with them standing in front of the Fillmore and all their equipment cases, and it says the Allman Brothers Band, and that's so exciting to me as a teenager.
Right.
But now you're so overexposed.
It's in your face.
And everything. You see anything you want, and because somebody's filming some Dave Grohl come out of a hotel room in a shitty mood, and all of a sudden there's a scandal.
Yeah.
Because some idiot's got Dave Grohl's the nicest guy I ever want to meet. But, somebody's got an iPhone that catches him in a bad moment, and it goes viral and all that. And in the pandemic, you see concerts, everybody's doing concerts from their living room. And you got, am I having a senior moment? He's married to the redhead, Keith Urban.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
In Australia, did a show from his garage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a show. A show it's dark, and there's lights on it on a lonely stage, and there's a piano or a band.
Mm-hmm.
That's a show, and you wait for it, and you get your ticket, and you go and you see the show. It's not watching a guy sing his greatest hits in his kitchen,
right,
and live stream it on YouTube. Right. The mystique, it just kills the mystique for me. Which is why I never did one.
There's really none of that. You're right, and our thought process, yours and mine, are very much in lockstep. And I just mentioned this not too long ago to another guest. Back in the day, you didn't even know what the fucking artist looked like half the time because there was a mystique. Like, you know how many years I went and didn't even know what the band Sweet or 10cc or Poco or any of the aforementioned artists, I didn't even know what they looked like. And then years later, the internet and YouTube roll around, and I pull up a song, cover of the Rolling Stone by Dr. Hook, and it's like, wait, that guy wore an eye patch on his eye? I had no idea.
That was Ray.
Exactly.
That's what I did know.
Exactly. And it's like, there was something cool about not knowing this mystique about the guys. And now, when these people take a shit, because it's all over the internet, it waters down the artist, I think, to a certain degree, right? And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Yeah.
Economics 101. Something is worth what somebody else will pay for it.
Absolutely.
Gold has value because somebody said it did. Otherwise, that is just a soft metal that makes pretty bracelets, whatever. Fiat money has value because fiat means by decree. Somebody said this has value. Otherwise, it's just paper. So music has value because it costs something.
Yes.
And you need some effort. You need a system. You need to buy records. You need to invest go see the band, buy the T-shirt, etc. That's the old days.
Yes.
These days, music is free. It costs nothing. Spotify, if you get it with the normal Spotify subscription where they have ads, it's free.
Yeah.
So you tell me if music is, if an object A is worth what customer B will pay for it, what's music worth?
Exactly.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Who's going to go buy the record if you can get it for free, right?
Oh, yeah. Nobody. I wouldn't. I get it.
Absolutely.
And, like I said, I don't even have a record player or a CD player. I listen to Spotify myself, although it uses mostly YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I have premium YouTube, which means no ads. So that's $9 a month.
Sure.
And I can be on there and watch everybody, and every song is on YouTube with or without a video. Every one of my songs, 20 albums of my songs, since 2019, I made a deal with a record label. It's on Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, Apple Music, YouTube, every platform in the world.
Sure.
Pandora, Tidal, whatever they're called. 20 of my albums are on, and then the other ones from other labels too, almost all of them. So 30 albums of mine are basically free.
Yeah.
Okay, now I did really, really well, and I'm endlessly thankful for that because I don't want to work and I don't want to be homeless, and I just want to do what I want to do, and I've been astoundingly lucky in that I've never done anything I didn't want to do. But imagine a kid now that's really, really talented, the next Dylan, Springsteen, Van Morrison, you name it. Mm-hmm. How's he going to get anywhere? You don't know. I mean, you see, well, here's an example of somebody that I think's done an amazing job. Chris Stapleton, the country singer, amazing singer, amazing songwriter. He looks like a biker. Mm-hmm. He looks scary. He's got this big beard. He wears denim. He looks scary as hell. Wouldn't want to meet him, behind a bar. And brilliant musician, and he's done well, and he's the exception. But then you look at all the pop music, and where I come from, the guy that sings the song wrote it, hopefully wrote some truth, or at least something entertaining. And now you see songs with 30 writers listed, or 8 writers listed, or 12, or 15, or 17. And it's all, not all. Taylor Swift is a great writer. She writes her own, and she's fantastic. And Ed Sheeran writes his own. And it's just pop. I'm not denigrating pop at all. They fill football stadiums, and they're good. Ed Sheeran writes his own songs. You see the copyright is Ed Sheeran music and lyrics, Taylor Swift music. But then you see the lion's share of these pop productions with 8, 7, 8, 12 writers, 5 producers, and everything's all smoothed out, and they have something called auto-tune, and everybody's heard that word, and that just means making it, in air quotes, perfect. Well, perfect isn't art. Perfect is what robots do.
Yes.
A robot could make a widget, 5,000 widgets a day forever until it breaks down and needs to be repaired, and they'll all be perfect.
Yes.
But that's not art. Art is a human being doing something best he can and as emotively as he can. And I tell you what, the internet killed that dead.
Yes.
So back to lucky us, I learned my stuff in the 60s, had a job from the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, which were the best years for the music business there ever were. The music business died in 2001 when streaming started. Lars was right.
Napster days. Yeah.
Napster?
Sure.
Yeah. Lars was right.
Yeah.
And
but everybody thought he was a dick, right?
Yeah, we thought he was a dick. Yeah, and he, including me. I said, "Oh, come on, it's just
lighten up.
What's the big deal?"
Right.
Well, the big deal is Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music.
Yeah,
they pay us.
It's a big business.
I get streamed a lot. I have on Spotify now, not a lot, not like Adele a lot or Taylor Swift a lot. But I looked. I didn't look. Somebody looked. I had 93,000 listeners a month on Spotify. Okay, he said, that's really good. I said, okay. And I'll take it. And, whatever. It is what it is. And I get, they pay me. I can live from it. It's okay. But hell, I mean, what if you only have 40 listeners a month and you're the next Elton John? Okay.
No, you're going to be eating bologna sandwiches is probably what you're going to be eating with no bread. Yeah.
I mean, you got huge rock bands, not huge, middle. The huge rock bands still do well. I mean, Iron Maiden's playing arenas here in Germany next month, and I'm going to go see them.
Sure.
And I know the drummer and Nico, and they're still doing well. But remember the band we talked about from Roger that Graham was in? They're touring England and post-pandemic, and some of these bands are selling 60, 80 tickets.
Yeah.
People are worried they're going to freeze this year. They can't pay the heating bill. My heating bill just quadrupled. Recently, I used pellets. I have a wood pellet heating system, super modern. Supposed to be very economical. No. Pellets went from $220 a ton to $800.
Jeez.
Overnight. Gas prices. People are older people and retirees are saying, do I eat or do I pay the heating bill? And it gets cold here. Crazy. And the big stadium gigs are still happening for the superstars, but your usual musicians that used to sell 400 or 500 tickets so you could make a living are now selling 60 or 80 or 40 or nothing or canceling.
Yep.
And I'm not a grouchy old curmudgeon that says everything used to be better, but in the music business, everything used to be better.
Well, I'm not old by the definition of the word, but I'm not a teenager anymore either. And I think the older that I get, it's a scary thought to get old because a lot of things change, and I think life gets tough.
Hurts too.
Medically, financially, we could talk for days about that, but I let's go back just real quick. So did you say that you have you not been back to Hawkeye Road since you were a young boy? You have not. Okay.
1969.
Really? Wow.
Was the last time I've been there. But because of the internet, you can Google it.
Sure.
You can Google Maps and Google Earth.
Yes.
And like I said, it's a house my dad built for $11,000, which was a lot of money in 1956, and it's over $500,000.
Jeez.
So,
well, you say that you knew what you wanted to do back in 1959, and I think you must have been 5 or 6 years old at this time. Did you really know at 5 or 6 years old that I'm going to be a musician, and that's how I'm going to?
Not going to be. I am a musician.
Okay. Wow.
Whatever comes of it, I had no idea what that meant. Except my mom had a Harry Belafonte record and a Joan Baez's first record. Played them, and my dad had Scheherazade from Rimsky-Korsakov, a Russian composer of this big symphony, Sinbad the Sailor Symphony. And my dad would play that for me and say, and this is where Sinbad fights the pirates and this and that. And I was just enthralled and by Harry Belafonte's voice and Joan Baez's voice. And I was 4 or 5, and we got a piano in the house. Thanks, Dad. And I would just monopolize on the piano all day long every day. I was a musician when I was 5, and I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, sure.
But I knew what I was I knew what it was.
It's interesting that I think I'm 61 episodes into my show.
Yeah.
And I have asked that question of a lot of the artists. When did you know that music was going to be what you did? And you know that if I've asked 61 people that, and I haven't asked 61, but if I did ask 61 people, 95% of them have said 6 years old, 6 years old, 6 years. There's this common denominator amongst musicians that they know at a very, very early age that's what they were going to do. And I find that very intriguing. It's self-defining too. If you define yourself when you're that young, that's what you are. Of course, a 6-year-old has no idea about the music business or about gigs or about what it means. But just his own self-definition. Mine has always been I'm a musician, and I never had another job. It's the only job I ever had. And if it had gone south, I would have eventually come to my senses, and I would have studied marine biology probably. Sure. Okay. Or something with a future. Or I'm a writer. I'm not a novelist. I found that out, and I like the song form. 4 verses in a bridge. And I've spent my whole life trying to get better at that. Like I said, if that hadn't worked out, I guess my marine biology would have been my choice. Well, you could have been a supermodel. You could have done that, right? My mom, I was always told I have a face for radio, so. Exactly. I was going to say, I could have been a supermodel or I could have dated one. It's probably better to just date one, right? Well, Heidi, if you're listening. Right? You were 14. I think you were 14 when you got that Lowry. Where do you think that Lowry is? You think it's just in the trash? Yeah. These days? Okay. Sure. Yeah, sure. I don't know the serial number or anything, but hey, we're talking about 55 years ago. And I tell you, it was my 14th birthday. Okay. And I knew I was getting a birthday present. But we didn't have very much money, not at all. And this Lowry was $250. My dad paid for it. And after I said I got a real Lowry organ on one of my birthdays, my father must have robbed a bank to pay for that. So I'm standing outside my house on Hawkeye Road, and a truck goes by, old flatbed pickup truck, wrapped with this. The organ was strapped on with belts on the flatbed, and it had a sheet over it, like a tarp over it. You couldn't see through it, but I figured that's a musical instrument. And it drove by my house, and my heart sunk. But he was looking for the address, and he went to the end of the street and turned around and found the address. He said, Carey? I said, oh, yeah. He's got something for you. And he pulled the tarp off, and it was this organ, and it changed my life. I was delirious. Wow. Changed my life because I'd been the whole time I'd been playing this little piano with him. Yeah. But Ray Manzarek and the Doors were the thing in California in 1967. Absolutely. And so, as I said, we put a band together with Phil Rojas, who's a genius guitar player, who still is a genius guitar player, but he's a physics
professor, Turlock, who I gave a shout out to before. And we had a band, and our repertoire was basically the first 2 Doors albums.
Really? How funny.
And I know that thing must have sounded so, I know it was so piercing. We figured out how to run a jack into the back and plug it into a little guitar amplifier, and it was loud. And like the song says, my folks let us rehearse in the living room. And we set a rock band up in their living room, and they would be out in the kitchen, and the unbelievable support from the parents, just amazing.
Wow. And
the next line is they never got that living room back. They didn't.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they didn't.
And my mom would drive us to gigs, and we truck the Lowry around on some pickup truck, or it would almost fit in the trunk of a station wagon. It wasn't a big Hammond organ.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get those till a lot later, but still, it made organ-like sounds really loud.
Yeah. Do you own a Hammond these days?
The truth is, no. I've had 5 or 6, and I've always had C3s, which is the one that John Lord played, and Matthew Fisher played an A100, but that's the same. It's the same organ in a different body. And B3 is the same. The jazz one that you see everybody playing, Greg Allman played one. Mm-hmm. That's it. This is all the same organ with different. The only difference is the body.
Okay.
And I've had 5, and then I found out that now they make Hammond. It's called a Hammond clone, and there's about 5, including Hammond, and they make one that weighs 20 pounds and sounds identical or better,
right,
than any of the 5 that I had anyway.
Yeah.
And a Hammond organ was like 375 pounds. And the Leslie speaker that you needed with it was, 155. Really, really heavy. And
sure.
You needed roadies, and they'd always break, and you have to oil them, and the mechanical. It's an invention from the 30s,
Yep.
And no, so I don't know. When I use virtual Hammonds,
sure.
And with the Soulmates group I told you about before, with this super group here in Europe, I always get a Hammond B3. That's fun. It's like nostalgic.
Yeah.
But in the studio, I use some kind of clone.
Yeah. One more song I'd like to feature a clip of, and this is a song called Hallelujah, I'm Alive. Let's take a quick listen to the clip, and we'll come back and chat about that.
Okay, see you in a minute.
All right.
When I was just lying there, poison in my blood running everywhere, I could feel you. I could feel you. I didn't see the lightning, didn't hear the thunder. 3 little words and the rug pulled under me, and I feel you. I still feel you. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I can see you, so I'm alive. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I will be with you until we die.
That was a song called Hallelujah, I'm Alive off the Lucky Us record. Tony, this song is a deep song, and it's a touching song, and I've probably listened to this on vinyl 50 times. Hopefully your head doesn't get too big, your ego doesn't blow up by me telling you that, but
it's exploding.
I wanted to ask.
I'm expanding in all kinds of parts of my body.
Exactly, right? Ones that I can't even see right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned poison in your blood in this song. Are you referring to chemo in that line?
No, cancer.
Just cancer in general. Okay.
Sepsis.
Yeah.
Sepsis is septicemia is by definition blood poisoning, and I woke up from this adventure, and my youngest daughter was there. She was 9 at the time. This was 13 years ago. She might have been 10. And the first thought that I had when I woke up is, hallelujah. I made it, because like I said, a septic shock, your kidneys shut down, and the organs start to fail one by one, and they rush into the ICU, and they pump you full of antibiotics, and I wasn't aware of it. I was in a coma, but
sure.
Yeah, I'm well read enough to know how dangerous it is.
Yeah,
so anyway, hallelujah, I'm alive.
Absolutely, and it's kind of interesting. I went to dinner with my wife Terry last night, and I don't even remember how the conversation came up about Casey Kasem, right? And she's like, when did he die? And I said, I don't know. So I started doing some Googling on Casey. And, of course, he did the voice of Shaggy forever on the cartoons, sure, yeah, right? And I didn't realize that sepsis is what he died from as well. So it's really, really common, and it's often fatal, and it gets 10% more fatal every hour. No kidding. Your chances sink if you get sepsis, and they recognize it by your white blood cell count, and if it goes over 30,000 or 40,000, that's just a number, but it means something to the scientists. Then you are septic, not like the tank of the same name, but you are right. You have septicemia, which is blood poisoning, and it's really, really dangerous. And there was a famous actress here. Lived in Switzerland. She bumped her head. She slipped and fell down, but on a rug. She thought she was okay, but she clipped the side of her head on a coffee table, and nothing, and she didn't even go to the doctor for it. She said, I always got a bump on her head, and she that gave her sepsis, and she died. No kidding. And like a week later, she felt punky waking up and said, I'm coming down with something. And the way you feel when you're septic is otherworldly. You think you're in a parallel universe. It's just a crazy feeling. It's not particularly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't hurt a huge fever, but you don't really notice it. Mm-hmm. And it's just like you're spaced out, Wow. I found it really ironic that conversation came up with us. And I found out that he had sepsis, and then we talked about you having sepsis, and here the next day later, it's a theme. But was the song Hallelujah, I'm Alive, was it written to or for your wife specifically? No, to my daughter. Your daughter, okay. My youngest daughter, and because she, like I said, when I woke up, she was there. Okay, and, I scared to death, sure. Just a kid. Wow, and. I mean, the reason I stayed in Germany all these years, I had a chance to go back in 1986, which if I had done, and I don't think this way, I should have had or would have, but mm-hmm. if I had gone back to the States, I would have continued to be in the charts and all that, and in the States. But I had other things to do here. I was producing and writing, and had a lot of success in Europe. Well, my point is, I had 3 kids, and they're German kids. Mm-hmm. You can't transplant them to L.A. Right. I mean, some people do, but I wouldn't. Yeah. And they go to, everybody's got health insurance. They go to the best schools in the world. They're cosmopolitan. They're in Europe. And if you get on a plane at the next airport, which happens to be Frankfurt, Germany here, within 2 hours, you're in the Mediterranean, you're in any one of 15 countries, Scandinavia, Austria, mm-hmm. Sweden, Norway, Poland, wherever you want to go. It's all right there. And that's what I like about Europe. Yep. So that's why I stay here. I get that question a lot. Why did I stay here so long? Am I anti-American? No, I'm American down to my bones. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't going to transplant a family to the States. That makes perfect sense. And it's funny. I was just having that conversation with Graham Bonnet. Yeah. And I said, it seems more common that a lot of, and I know quite a few musicians, American musicians, that have made the leap to Europe and are there performing, doing their thing. But then it seems like the ones over there, including Graham Bonnet, are now here in America. The Europeans are now here. It's like they're doing this across the pond. If you're from here, you go there. If you're from there, you come here. Yeah. So it's interesting how that works out. But it grabs Australia. Don't forget. Sure. He's a long way from home. Yes, absolutely, he is, because we talked about his writings with the Bee Gees and things of that nature. like I asked Graham, outside of music, what keeps you busy these days when you're not doing musical things? Is there anything that Tony Carey, do you have a hobby?
A bunch of them.
Yeah.
Gardening.
Okay.
I have a really problematic, difficult garden with 14, the house is 100 years old. It's a stone house from 1920. Big garden with 14 fruit trees.
Really?
I fucking hate fruit trees. I would saw them all down if they didn't keep me so busy.
Well, do they produce anything? That's the $64 million question. What are you growing there? What are the trees?
Well, I mean, the trees are. The apple tree is right outside the porch is 40, 50 feet high, and a good tree, a commercial apple tree, is 10 feet high.
Really?
First of all, so you can reach it to pick them, and second of all, the nutrition doesn't have to go up 60 feet for the apples, so the apples are worthless.
Really?
And they fall down like tons of apples fall down. Cherries, I have 3 cherry trees, tons of cherries, but they're way too big to be like viable.
Uh-huh.
You know, if you go to a cherry farm, you see rows of evenly spaced 10-foot cherry trees loaded with cherry. No, these are big monsters, and they go over the roof. So I get up there with my chainsaw and cut the limbs down. I got to mow the lawn. I got bamboo, which was a mistake, but I got it. The bamboo.
You can't kill that shit. Everywhere. You can't kill that shit, can you?
No, and it's
like planting a banana tree.
it'll travel underground. It'll send a shoot out underground and show up on the far end of the backyard. But it'll also do it to the neighbors. So I got to go to the neighbors on the left. I got a neighbor on the left, and I got to go over there at least once a year and say sorry about that, and cut the bamboo down from his yard that's escaped mine. So that was not the wisest decision, but so that's gardening, and I go fishing.
Okay. I
love to fish. I fish up in Norway mostly, and Sweden, and when I was a lot younger, my Hemingway days, I did a lot of deep sea fishing. I caught every kind of marlin there is, and I fished in Florida and in Mauritius and in Indian Ocean and in Cabo San Lucas and in Hawaii and everywhere you can fish for big billfish. I did that. And I read. I read about 4 books a week. I read all the time. And the best invention that I've ever seen is the ebook, which will hold 4,000 books because they're small files. And one of the problems I'd had when I always read since I was a kid, and one of the problems I'd have when I go on tour is I'd have to take an extra duffel bag
full of books.
And then I come home with 70 books. Mm-hmm. They go on a bookshelf. And we moved down to Spain I was down to Spain with my baby daughter for 6 years until she had to go to a real school. Then we had to move back to Germany. But the island of Mallorca, and it was 25,000 books, and a library. It was just paperback, nothing valuable, first editions or anything, just novels, you know. And I tried to give them away, and nobody would take them because they're in English here. And I called the American school here. I figured, they'll take them for sure. And they said, well, we'll only charge you $3,000 to pick them up.
It cost you to give them away.
I threw them away. That hurt. That hurt so much. I threw them away. But then the ebook came, and I got everything. My library's complete again. I got thousands of books on my computer. I can move them over to the ebook, and so I read all the time.
And it's funny that you say that, because most avid readers, they want to feel that book in their hand when they read.
I did in the beginning too.
Okay. So that there is some truth to that. Then,
sure.
Yeah.
The smell, the way the book smells.
The paper. Yeah.
But the ebook, you don't need a reading light. You don't keep your wife up.
That's true.
Night.
That's true.
It's illuminated by itself, and you can make it as dim as possible and turn the other way. And it doesn't keep your wife away.
Well, we talked about it earlier. There's pros and cons to everything, technology included, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I love technology, but it killed my business.
Yes. And how great is it that you and I can talk. You're in Budenheim in Germany or wherever in Germany.
Yeah.
And, I'm here in the States, and the audio is just perfect, and the video is wonderful in real time. Yeah. Whereas, it costs you $1 million to travel over there to have the same conversation, right?
Or the operator says 40 cents more for the next 3 minutes.
Please, Mrs. Avery. That's right. Yeah.
One of my top 10 favorite songs is Sylvia's Mother.
Love that song.
Of all times, written by Shel Silverstein.
Yep. Love that song. And it's funny, you probably, as I kind of worded it along with you might have been thinking, wow, he knows that song.
No, I'm not surprised. You told me already you were the geek.
Yeah. Well,
I knew you'd know it.
On a more personal note, how are you feeling these days?
Old. Getting old hurts. I don't want to get into detail, but there's something called post-sepsis syndrome.
Okay.
If you've had sepsis, and in my case, it manifests itself in my legs hurt. They really hurt all the time, and I'm running around to the doctors. I got another appointment with a pain clinic here, a very good one in 2 weeks actually, and it took forever to get the appointment, and I had to send them all this information, and they're going to look at it, but it's neuropathic pain. And hey, if that's, but you can tell by talking to me, I'm in a good place. And if just the fact that I'm here, lucky me,
lucky you,
and
lucky us.
The fact that I don't have any reason or room to bitch, and I'm not bitching.
Sure.
Getting old hurts, and some people it hurts more than others. And I use a wheelchair service at the airport. They do that for free. That'd be hard for me to check in and then walk all the way down to the gate.
Sure.
And I take trains and taxis, so I don't have to walk very much, and I don't even bother to drive. It's always trains for me. Mm-hmm. And the German trains are fabulous and fast and usually on time, and so I'm feeling okay.
Yeah, good. Well, I think about that.
Got to do the garden. Got to do the garden. It's my middle daughter is going to visit me in 3 weeks. Okay. And we're going to do the garden together because she's the stud with the chainsaw now. Really? I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Take some of that money you made and just pay people to chop down that fucking apple tree.
Nobody's touching my apple tree but me. Nobody's touching my apple tree but me.
All right.
And I can't do ladders anymore. That's one thing. I won't go on the ladder. But Jackie, my kid, she's 31. She loves ladders and she loves chainsaws. She's a cowboy like her dad. And we'll have a great time when she comes, and we'll
That's awesome.
The garden for next spring.
Anything new the listeners can expect from the Tony Carey camp as it relates to a tour, new music, anything that you can tell the listeners about before we sign them?
Talking about gender hopping, I'm doing something I'm calling the Song Book. I know that's been done, but I don't have a better name for it. And I'm doing Frank Sinatra covers and that thing and Rat Pack type stuff with a full big band and very crazy, eclectic orchestral and big band arrangements. And I've been working on it for about 3 years with this brilliant Dutch arranger who actually does films and a lot of TV ads and everything. And we're about halfway through, and we do Over the Rainbow, the Judy Garland song, Summer Wind, which is one of my favorite songs ever from Sinatra's Summer Wind, and it was a very good year. And what else? We're on a Que Sera Sera, really bluesy with big band arrangement. So whenever that's finished, and I can't promise when that'll be, I'll release that, and that is like a genre mindfuck because it's nothing I've ever done.
It's all crooner kind of stuff. And I'm assuming you're singing on all of those songs. Okay.
Oh, awesome. Hell yes. Okay. All right. I'm having a ball. I'm having a ball. I see myself in Caesar's Palace in 1963 in a tux with a martini and a cigar. And singing when I was 17. It was a very good year.
Man, you're gonna have a residency in Las Vegas after you put that out. You know that, right?
Yes.
How awesome. Well, listen, where can the listeners find you on the internet? If they want to find all things Tony Carey, where would they go to do that?
Well, here, I don't have much of a social media presence. I hate social media, but I am on Facebook. There's Facebook. TonyCarey.com. There's not much information on it, but so that's how you get a hold of me. Go to TonyCarey.com or Facebook, and you'll find me.
Yeah, and I'm not
hiding.
Right, exactly. It's hard for public people to hide, right? It's funny. I kind of feel privileged because, you gave me your phone number and we shared some text, and you said, I'm going to put you in my contact list until you piss me off. I thought that was hilarious. And I'm still in there, and I still correspond with you there. So I haven't pissed you off yet. So one thing to add to the socials there, you guys can also find Tony on Facebook at facebook.com/TEECEE68 TC68. And I think there is also a link to some of the Apple Music and the Spotify stuff that you can find at hyperurl. It's called hyperurl.co/Tony Carey. So if you guys go to a web browser and type in hyperurl.co/Tony Carey, you can find a lot of his stuff there as well. Tony,
easier. Just go to YouTube and put my name in the thing, and you get 400 songs.
There you go.
Spotify, or go to Apple Music or iTunes or whatever.
Yeah, and I think most people know how to find. Yeah, most people know how to work Google these days too, right? Tony Carey. So. Yeah, sure. What did we do before Google?
I didn't do anything. Google is the ultimate arbiter of truth. You can't bullshit your way through an argument anymore because somebody's going to have Google.
Absolutely.
And prove your ass wrong.
And I think about that as a kid, when we would have to write a paper or something for school, you went to the fucking encyclopedia, which is static information. Sure. It's old, it's outdated. Sure. And I said, what in the hell? Now you have everything at your fingertips, up to the minute, real-time information. What in the hell were we doing when we bought an encyclopedia, 50 encyclopedias
Sure. We had one too. Sure, of course.
Yeah, it's just crazy how times have changed, man.
I know we're running long, but I'll tell you, it's really, I needed a new lawnmower blade. And it's because I ran over too many rocks and it chips the blade up. I couldn't sharpen it anymore, so I needed a new lawnmower blade. So I tipped it over, took the blade off, got the model number, ordered one on Amazon, came the next day. Then I had to put it on. And there's a trick that they don't tell you in the description. There's a little tiny hole, and you have to put like a pin or something really thin in the hole to be able to screw the new it's a reverse thread lawnmower blade. So I sat there for half an hour trying to get the thing to screw on, and it would just like revolve. It wouldn't attach. Okay. So I said, I got an idea, and I went to YouTube, and I said, Bosch lawnmower blade change. Yeah. And there was a 3-minute video saying, no shit. No, I know. Anything you want. I know. There was a video that says you need to put a pointy, thin object in this hidden hole here. Then you can screw the lawnmower, and of course it worked, and I did it, and I had it. So that illustrates the modern age. I'd be still sitting there bitching, or I would have sent it back, or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a tongue-in-cheek thing, but they say you can actually learn to build a house by watching YouTube videos, right?
You can learn anything, and if you're interested in music production, for instance, I think YouTube gets 400 hours of content every minute.
Can you imagine what the hard drive space is they need to store all of this shit? What's fun? What's funny is I just bought a new car about a month ago, 3 weeks ago or whatever. They said if you want the owner's manual, you can purchase it on this website. And I'm like, who needs a fucking owner's manual to a car? I've got YouTube, man. It doesn't cost me a penny to go out, and I can figure out how to do anything on this car that 73 people have already videoed how to do this shit, right?
Exactly.
It's amazing. Exactly. Absolutely amazing.
That's absolutely wonderful. And all these old vintage instruments, I don't really have them anymore, but for people that collect or repair Hammond organs, Moog synthesizers, and all the stuff from the 60s and 50s and 70s. There's instruction manuals online, anything, how to oil a Hammond and not fuck it up, because it's really tricky. Because it spins. It's a manual spinning thing, a Hammond organ, and you have to oil it once in a while. And, how to maintain a 53 Studebaker, whatever. Yeah. It's all there.
What will we be doing in 20 years from now? What will it be? It's mind-boggling how everything progresses. But, Tony, listen, this chat has exceeded my expectations. Chatting with you was worth the wait, my friend. You're one of the great songwriters and performers of our time, and I thank you for all the amazing work that you've given us over the years. And this has been a true pleasure. So thank you for that.
I'm getting aroused.
Don't tell everybody. This is public, man. Shoot me a text, right?
Yeah, you can only see my face. You can't see what's happening.
That's right.
We're on Zoom, folks.
So as always, I ask the listeners to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Also, make sure to follow Tony on all of his social media outlets. You can find the show on Facebook at Backstage Pass Radio Podcast, on Instagram at Backstage Pass Radio, Twitter at Backstage Pass PC, and on the website, BackstagePassRadio.com. Thank you guys for listening and tuning into the show. And make sure you take care of each other, and we will see you right back here on the next episode of Backstage Pass Radio.
Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Backstage Pass Radio. Make sure to follow Randy on Facebook and Instagram at Randy Halsey Music and on Twitter at @RHalseyMusic. Also make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on alerts for upcoming podcasts. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to share the link with a friend and tell them Backstage Pass Radio is the best show on the web for everything music. We'll see you next time right here on Backstage Pass Radio.